Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. So glad that you could join us today. Our guest in studio today has a very unique mission. His name is Topher Wurtz, and he is an autism father. The father's an autistic child and a career media and technology company executive who's applying his professional experience and knowledge to a very personal issue, that being autism, in an attempt to improve the lives of millions of people that are dealing with autism with their children or as adults. How are you doing today, Topher Wurtz?
We're doing great. Thank you.
Most of our listeners are health professionals themselves in some capacity or another, many of which may be extremely familiar with autism. But for those of us that aren't familiar or maybe have a very limited knowledge of autism, based on your experience as an autism dad, what exactly is autism?
Well, autism now refers to a broad spectrum of essentially neurological differences. Mm-hmm. So the children appear to be born with different neurology than what we would consider typical peers, and as a result of that, they can be anywhere from sort of just unusual or quirky individuals, maybe that have some social challenges, they don't make as much eye contact, that sort of thing, all the way to kids that maybe will need support for their entire lives to live. So many are nonverbal. Some also combine other situations like seizures or diet issues, allergies, and such like. So it's quite a broad spectrum based on a neurological difference.
Now, talking about, say, diabetes, you have pre-diabetes or diabetes type 1, type 2, and things of that nature. Does autism have such designations as to the severity or the degree or the types of behavior that one would display? Are there different levels that are identifiable by other means than just the displayed behavior?
Nothing as specific as that. You'll hear folks talking about more or less high functioning or more or less deep in the spectrum. But autism doesn't have anything as specific as diabetes. Maybe autism would be better correlated with something like Alzheimer's or ALS or a neurological challenge where you have different maybe in those cases that things progress, whereas with autism maybe they're more static through the life of the person, but nothing as specific as type 1, type 2, that sort of thing. And the other thing about it is that a lot of the folks that diagnosed on the autism spectrum with a fairly intense and consistent social, behavioral, educational intervention from the time that the diagnosis is made, maybe at less than 2 years of age, to when we all kind of become who we're more or less going to be in our mid-20s. With that intervention, it can change quite a lot, and we can help these kids to kind of live and succeed right in with the rest of us.
You are an autism dad. How many kids do you have?
I have two boys, and they're 13 and 14. They're actually 11 months apart, and the younger of the two boys, Kirby, is autistic. He's probably what would be, he has a classical autism diagnosis. He might be considered moderately autistic or reasonably high functioning. He is verbal. We do have language and so forth, but he does have challenges learning, and so as a result, he's in a special autism support classroom and so forth. Physically, he's a very healthy kid. He swims, he runs like the wind and so forth, but when it comes to relationships with other peers at his age or his own brother or so forth, he has sort of social challenges there.
Now, saying that he is the youngest of the two kids, there are tests through amniocentesis that, I guess, identify certain genetic markers. Is that something that you were never told about, or is it something that you figured was not necessary to look into based on the fact that you had your first child and everything went okay? Or is this even a genetic disorder?
Well, there's a lot of work being done on the genetics. Certainly there's a project between the big autism nonprofit, Autism Speaks, and Google to do deep researching into the genetics of a large sample of the autistic population. I'm not actually aware of a marker. Maybe I'm uninformed here in that you could get from an amniocentesis that might warn you of this, like you could of Down syndrome. Kirby seemed to be relatively typically developing, and many of these kids are like this until he was about a year and a half old when we start to notice some differences. There's lots of ideas about what might cause autism, and some of them are kind of kooky. Some of them make some scientific sense, but none of them seem to have been proven out yet. For our point of view, both myself personally and with the project Autism Village, we're not so focused on causes and cures. There's lots of smart researchers working on that. And we're focused on trying to help families navigate the day-to-day challenges, and then autistic adults navigate the day-to-day challenges of sort of a world that's a little difficult for them.
What are some of the challenges for autism families and for the people who have autism themselves, just in doing, everyday things? But what are some of the challenges that you encountered that prompted you to create Autism Village and the app that we're going to speak about momentarily?
Well, there's really a whole host of things that as an autism parent you're suddenly confronted with. So instead of just sort of a pediatrician, you may have a developmental pediatrician. If you decide to pursue some sort of pharmacological intervention, you're going to have a psychiatrist. At school, you're going to have special education teachers and specialists, potentially through the wraparound or behavioral support services of the state. At home, you may have staff working with your child, and they'll be supervised by a psychologist and a behavioral support specialist. And there's lots of interesting therapies to try and help the kids break out, play therapy, equestrian therapy, all this sort of thing. So the first challenge is that you go from what would be a typical parenting scenario to one where you have a lot of resources that you have to identify and coordinate. On the more practical side, you may have to find a school placement that works. You may have diet situations where the child seems to have an allergy to gluten or casein, and you're trying to use special diets. So you need to identify restaurants when you go out that will support that. The kids have a lot of sensory issues. The light, sound, different things like this can challenge them, and certainly crowds and so forth. So finding a dentist that understands autism and can work with these kind of kids, or your regular pediatrician, or even like a barber, because a lot of them are hypersensitive about haircuts and things. So identifying places, resources, whether it's a school, a doctor, or just a restaurant or a barber, or even a playground. A lot of them elope. They run away. So that's going to be safe and work for you is a challenge. So those are some of the practical challenges that are different when you're raising a child on the autism spectrum.
You were in a situation where you found out early on. Are there instances where a child isn't diagnosed until later, say as 11, 12, maybe 15 years old? Or is this something that is easily identifiable at an early age, such as your son?
It really depends on where the child is on the spectrum. So a very high-functioning child may grow to adulthood. There are many adults that now believe that they're on the spectrum and were never diagnosed. Children that show more classical autism and maybe are a little deeper in the spectrum don't become verbal on time. So forth. Those children are often diagnosed fairly straight away at a young age. Typically, though, sort of a year and a half old is about the earliest that you get enough information to diagnose whether a child may be autistic or not. The early diagnosis and early intervention professionals in many states that are run by Easter Seals or some other organization are really quite good. They've been doing it for a long time, and they can generally identify a lot of the things. And of course, one of the things that I tell parents, it's a tough diagnosis to get, and so parents get defensive sometimes about it. And one of the things that I tell parents is it's better to be wrong and overdiagnosed than to lose critical time when you can really make a difference trying to help the child at a young age to adapt to a world that's a little difficult for them. So I really encourage new parents not to be afraid of the diagnosis.
Autism Village, is that sort of a take on the fact that it takes a lot of people and a lot of resources? Tell us a bit about Autism Village.
In a way, we did take that. I think if you trace that back far enough, it may even go back to an old African proverb. But what we learned is that there are 3 million families raising kids on the autism spectrum. That's growing now at 1 in 68 births. 1.5% of births are being diagnosed autistic. It's 1 in 42 boys, so it's a lot of boys that have this challenge. And it really is a community in its own way. When autism families gather, we swap stories about good schools, good dentists, good parks, and so forth. And so we did take a play on that to create an app that would help really spread that word and help families all over the world to identify autism-friendly places and places of businesses and schools and services.
And this app that you've developed, it is as integral in finding these resources, yes?
Yeah, I mean, the app is only really a vessel. So just like an app or a service like Yelp or Foursquare or TripAdvisor, it really is dependent on the autism community to adopt it and to put places in and rate and review them. Mm-hmm. But we've had an enormous response to the Kickstarter, and already on our website, we have people adding businesses, adding parks, adding doctors and restaurants and all manner of things, and with ratings and reviews. So the idea being that we crowdsource the ratings and reviews from the autism community. And then when you're traveling on your smartphone, you can see autism-friendly places that are nearby you, and likewise you can add and rate and review. So it really is a community service. We're just the vessel for all that information.
Ed, where exactly can our listeners download the app?
Yeah, you can go to autismvillage.com as our homepage for updates and information. The app will launch in the summer of 2015, but online capabilities like the ability to rate and review places are already up on our website, and that's the best place to keep track of what's going on.
Some really great information. You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. In studio today, it's been our pleasure to be talking with Topher Wurtz. He's an autism dad and a career media and technology company executive who's applying his professional experience to help to improve the life of millions of people who are dealing with autism, autism families, and autistic adults. And we've been here talking a little bit about what autism is and some of the challenges that those suffering from autism face, and also about this brand new app that's going to give people who are looking for autism-friendly businesses and resources a leg up in their search. It's been great talking with you today, Topher.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.